So go ahead and take this, fold it in half. The way we designed these notes to be, and actually it's a little bit below half. You got to fold it so you can see the name line. We made it so that you can glue it in like this, and this has your formula on the front, and then you'll be able to flip it open to see the formula inside, or to see your examples inside. So you can fold it like this. We've just got a couple blanks on the front that we're going to go through. Today, we are learning the last thing that we are going to learn about quadratics in standard form, and that is the quadratic formula. First thing I'm going to do is put my name on here. First hour. And then these first two blanks are just for the words quadratic formula. So the quadratic formula can find the zeros of any quadratic. So if your quadratic, if you don't want to factor it, or you can't factor it, or you don't remember how to factor it, or if it just cannot be factored, because not every quadratic can be factored, the quadratic formula will always help you find your zeros. In the quadratic formula, we are going to plug in A, B, and C. So A, B, and C come from our standard form quadratic, and then this right here is the quadratic formula. It is really long. We are never going to ask you to memorize it, but I'm going to give you a way to memorize it. The quadratic formula reads as follows. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. First thing that I want to look at is I want to look at this b squared minus 4ac. Do you guys recognize that? Where have we seen b squared minus 4ac before? 7.7. That is our discriminant. So we saw that part back in 7.7. Okay, so that b squared minus 4ac, I told you that's going to be part of a larger formula we're going to learn. And then the other part that's kind of cool is this right here, negative b over 2a. Negative b over 2a. We've seen that before as well. What does negative b over 2a do for us? We've used that in 1, 2, 3 lessons this unit. Negative b over 2a. Yep.
I forgot what it's called. It was when I don't know what it's 6.
We use it in 7.6, 7.5, and 7.1. That's how we find the x of our axis of symmetry. So, I just wanted to show you guys before we use it that a bunch of people kept asking me where the negative came from. A bunch of people kept asking me where the 2 came from. A bunch of people kept asking me where the 4 came from. It's all part of this bigger formula. So, before we start using this formula, I'm going to hop over to YouTube, and I am going to show you your life is going to be... Let me finish a sentence. Your life is going, like I said, you do not need to remember the quadratic formula, but if you do, it's going to make your life a lot easier because you're not going to have to look back every time. So, the easiest way to remember the quadratic formula, the way I learned how to remember the quadratic formula a million years ago in Algebra 1, is with learning it to the tune of Pop Goes the Weasel. So I'm going to play this because I'm not going to sing it. And I promise you, yes, it might get stuck in your head, but you need to know this for the rest of the math classes you're going to take in your entire life. So it might as well be something that you commit to memory. So here we go.
X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a.
So if you just get it with that rhythm.
X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a.
I think he does it like 2 more times.
X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a.
It's really dramatic. Anywho, so the reason why I wanted to play that is because, again, you're not gonna have to have this memorized, but it'll save you a couple minutes every time you're doing a problem. Not a couple minutes, but it'll save you 20 seconds every time you're doing a problem if you do have it memorized. And the more times you use it, the closer you'll get it to memory. All right, go ahead and flip this open. Let's talk about how we use the quadratic formula. And then we've got 2 examples, and then you've got 4 problems on your assignment. We've got into this point where that's all we can fit with these problems that are longer. It's 2 on notes, 4 on your assignment. Okay, right here we just have the quadratic formula again, so you don't have to flip back and forth. And then we have standard form again, so you know where A, B, and C are coming from. Here are your steps to use. The first thing that we are going to do is we are going to rewrite the formula by substituting in our values for A, B, and C. Substituting something in means to plug it in. So the first thing that we do is we plug in our values for A, B, and C. After that, we are going to perform all of our operations underneath the square root. So what that means is essentially we're going to find our discriminant. You like to do it piece by piece because it's way too much to do all at once, and you're gonna mess up order of operations. Once we have taken or found what's underneath our square root, we can then go ahead and take the square root. So once we've simplified out everything underneath the square root and gotten it into square root of 25 or square root of 36 or something like that, grab a note sheet, we can go ahead and take the square root. Once we've taken the square root, we are then going to split up into 2 fractions. So the thing about quadratics is that all the ones that we have today are going to have a positive discriminant, so they're going to have 2 zeros. And so we have 2 fractions. How we set up our 2 fractions, and we'll see this once we get there, is we are going to make one of them be plus and one minus. So I'm just going to write down 1 plus / 1 minus. And the reason why we do that is in the formula, we hear and we see x equals negative b plus or minus. We're literally going to split it up into plus or minus at some point. Okay, and then the last thing that we do is we are going to have fractions that we need to simplify out a lot of the times. So we are going to simplify out those fractions. So example 12 over 16, we would say, what can we divide 12 and 16 both by? 4. So we would do 12 divided by 4, which is 3. 16 divided by 4, which is 4. So 12 over 16 is the same as 3 over 4. So we're just going to reduce our fractions if we can at the end. All right. Any questions about the steps? Obviously, we haven't done an example. Any questions about the steps so far, though? Okay, we are going to go ahead and do our first example. I'm going to move this up so it's on the screen, but our steps are still there above, and we'll refer back to them. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite my formula down here so it's on the screen without any of my A, B, or C plugged in. So I'm going to rewrite x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared. And I'm going to go ahead and put that b in parentheses for myself, just like we did with our discriminant, because I know I need to plug it in parentheses, minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. So that's just me rewriting my formula. Then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find my values for A, B, and C in this particular example. So my value for A is 2. My value for B is 9. And my value for C is 7. 2, 9, and 7. Okay. Then we can plug in all of our numbers. I'm going to do that right here as we are going through. Okay, just a sec. Okay. Hello again, recording. All right, so we are going to go ahead and plug in each of those numbers now. So we plug in, we've got negative b, so that's going to be negative 9 on top, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so that's going to be 9 squared, minus 4 is part of the formula, times my a value is 2, times my c value is 7, all over 2a, which is 2 times 2. So we plug in values for b gets plugged in twice, a gets plugged in twice, c you just use once. I'm going to give you guys a second. I need you to make sure you have that written down, and then I need you to double check it with mine because it's important that you have it correct. Okay. Any questions about plugging things in? Yes. No, because this is the square root of everything underneath. If it was just the square root of 9 squared, it would. But we have to do 9 squared minus 4ac and then take the square root of that, which leads us in really well to our next step, which is going to be taking the square, figuring out what 9 squared minus 4 times 2 times 7 is. You can work that out by hand. You can work that out in a calculator. I'm going to do it in a calculator just because I think that's what most of you guys are going to do. So we're going to do 9 squared minus 4 times 2 times 7. So all I'm typing into my calculator is what's underneath the square root. I'll even highlight that for you. So all I'm typing into my calculator is this. I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to get 25. Okay. Come show me what you put in your calculator.
I put the square root in.
Okay, we don't want to put the square root in yet. Okay, so we've got 25. Any questions about doing just the 9 squared minus 4 times 2 times 7? Okay, once we've got that, we are now going to rewrite. Instead of having negative 9 plus or minus square root of all of those numbers, we now have negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 25 over, and I'm also going to work this out right now. 2 times 2 is 4. So I'm going to change that to a 4. So all I've done right now is I've worked out what's underneath the square root. I haven't done the square root yet. I've just done what's underneath the square root. Once we've done what's underneath the square root, now we can take the square root. In life, it will not always be perfect squares. In Algebra 1 today, it will always be perfect squares. You're welcome. What's the square root of 25? 5. So now we have negative 9 plus or minus 5 over 4. And if you guys remember back when we were doing square roots in 7.2, how we made you write plus or minus, look, that plus or minus is already there for you. So now we have negative 9 plus or minus 5 over 4. That brings us through step 3. Step 4 is something that's going to be kind of new. Step 4 is where we split up the plus or minus sign. So when we say negative 9 plus or minus 5, we literally mean one of our options is negative 9 plus 5. One of our options is negative 9 minus 5. And then those are both still over 4. So I'm now going to split up, and I've got 2 possible fractions because I'm going to get 2 possible answers. One of them is negative 9 plus 5. One of them is negative 9 minus 5 because I literally mean plus or minus. Okay. And then from there, I'm going to work out each of those fractions. Negative 9 plus 5. If I owe you $9 and I pay you 5 back, I still owe you 4. So this is negative 4 over 4. And then I can simplify that out. Negative 4 divided by 4 is just negative 1. My other fraction, I would do negative 9 minus 5. Negative 9 minus 5 is negative 14 over 4. And then 14 and 4, I can divide those both by 2. 14 divided by 2, that's going to give me negative 7. And then 4 divided by 2, that's going to give me 2. So my 2 answers here are negative 1 and negative 7 over 2. Okay. So, long process, but it really gets broken down step by step. You plug everything in, do just what's underneath the square root, then take the square root, and then split it up into plus and minus and solve each of them. So it's a long process, but it works out step by step, and each step isn't too unmanageable. Any questions right now before we do our second example? Okay, we're going to do one more example, and then your assignment has 4 problems on it. And anytime you guys have to do fractions, I give you an answer bank. Not anytime, but today I'm giving you an answer bank, just like I did with 7.6. You're welcome. Okay, second example for today. F of x equals 3x squared minus 8x minus 3. First thing that we're going to do, A, B, and C, are 3, negative 8, and negative 3. And those negatives are important. You have to pay attention to them. Our formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root. It's really hard for me to not sing it. I'm like singing it in my head of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. When I was a freshman in high school, YouTube wasn't a thing. My teacher didn't pull up a YouTube video. She brought in a cassette player of her and her husband singing the quadratic formula at home in front of their piano and played a cassette for us. And I'm not even that old. I think she was just that old. So just thought I'd share that with you because YouTube was a thing. It's just that she was maybe a million years old. Okay. We're going to go ahead and plug in, but she was a precious, precious woman, and we love her. We stand her. We're going to go ahead and plug in B, A, and C. So my B right here, this is important, just like when it was negative 8, just like when it was a negative in 7.1, the negatives cancel out. So negative 8 is positive 8 plus or minus the square root b squared, we got to put that negative 8 in parentheses, minus 4 times my A value is 3 times my C value is negative 3. And then that's all going to be over 2A, which is 2 times 3. Okay. Any questions about plugging things in? Okay. Then it's time to put negative 8 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 3. Make sure you use a minus sign in front of the 4, not a negative sign. And I should get 100. Anytime that you are figuring out what's underneath the square root, it should be a perfect square. JP, do you have a question?
So because it's 3 times negative 3, we normally cancel that out.
Yeah. So negative 8 squared is 64. Yeah. And then negative 4 times 3 would be negative 12. Negative 12 times negative 3 is positive 36. So if I were to work it out piece by piece, I would get this would be 64 and this would be positive 36. So if you're going to put it in the calculator, put it all in the calculator as is. If you're going to work it out piece by piece, it's going to end up being 64 plus 36, which is also 100. Okay, so what I've done so far now is I've put that in the calculator, and I got 100. So now I have 8 plus or minus the square root of 100 over 2a. So 2 times 3, I'm going to multiply that out to be 6. So I've now done steps 1 and 2. So this was step 1. This was step 2. Step 3 is to take the square root of 100. What number times itself is 100? 10. So now I've got 8 plus or minus 10 over 6. Step 4 is to split up into my two fractions, 1 plus and 1 minus. So I'm going to now have 8 plus 10 over 6 and 8 minus 10 over 6. And then I'm going to work both of those out. So 8 plus 10 is 18 over 6. 18 divided by 6 is 3. 8 minus 10 is negative 2. So now I have negative 2 divided by 6. What can I divide 2 and 6 both by? 2. I can divide them both by 2. I'm going to get 3 and also 1. So negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So I get negative 1/3. Michaela, what's your question?
Could it be like where I wrote it 1/3 on the other side?
Yeah. So like if you have these switches, is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
As long as you have the two answers, it doesn't matter what order they're in.
Okay.
Yep, good question. All right. Any other questions? All right. It is 8:23. I'm going to go ahead and stop this recording.